Hello everyone, it's History Behind the Warrior, and as always, welcome back to yet another video. Now today, with us still coming off the news of the seeming demise of Mortal Kombat 1, through the release of the Definitive Edition, marking the conclusive end to the life cycle of Mortal Kombat 1, and any possible release of future DLC moving forward, it has naturally sparked the question of just who exactly were the original planned characters for the future content of this particular installment? What was on the plate before support was seemingly cut off for this game? That is what we will be exploring today, so kinda spoilers ahead I guess. Now, it is just worth noting and saying that this will be both a mixture of an analysis as well as that of a theory. Because on the analytical side of things, we will be looking through the data mined content of the game, allowing us to freely explore the contents of MK1, and on the theoretical side of things, we will be talking about the characters hidden within the game, and analysing where exactly did they sit in the universe, possibly allowing us to pinpoint their intended origin for this very new world and era. The reason why I'm doing this is because it's pretty evident that on the Netherrealm side of things, there was definitely far more intended for the lifespan of this game than what we got, as game director Ed Boon has gone down on record on a frequent basis, documenting what he would like to see moving forward, before the higher-ups did of course cut support to this game. But just before we do start, I do wish to say and thank the Finny, who's basically been the one responsible for this video. For those unaware, he's one of MK's most infamous data miners who more often than not has really been on point when it's come to breaking down the inner workings of the game. So to say that he's a reliable source would be an understatement, as he was also the one who did design the Floyd tracker. However, with that in mind, please do remember that going forward, this is simply a video for what could have been, not what is due to the game's cancellation. And you do also have to be aware that in MK games, there is some dummy coding and placeholders, something kind of designed to throw off data miners with the contents of who's coming next. And that is actually something I will be pointing out in a bit. Now, getting to the characters themselves, whilst not all of their models are present in game, there is actually something that's notably a reoccurring theme amongst this trio, and that is that all their data mine dialogue actually shares exposition with Nitara. But why so is that the case? Well, unlike the other characters that are voiced amongst the roster here, with Nitara having been voiced by Megan Fox, it does mean that they did have a set allocated amount of time to hire the actress, thus meaning that they had to record as many voice lines in one session as possible. So this would include lines not just for that of the base roster, but of course future DLC characters, including the trio we do have here. So finally, let's start off here with a character that we do know does exist in the present, and actually has been foreshadowed towards through some intros dating as far back as the beta, Jade, or as known in this timeline, Countess Jade. Now this should come as no surprise to many of you, as Jade is a beloved character amongst the MK cast, being part of the iconic female ninja trio of the series. And in terms of lore and narrative, she does look to exist amongst the Edenian High Table. Outside of this title though, we do not know very much about her character, and the only bits that we do kind of know and piece together possibly hints that Jade and Katana have a bit of a distant relationship here, as having never been her bodyguard or protector in this era meant that the two paths didn't quite intertwine like previous timelines. As for her husband though, as it's typically a title bestowed upon marrying an earl, we don't really know. Whilst Koto was name dropped in game, he isn't at any point referred to with such a title. But then again, it could just be due to how this Edenia infused outworld works, being led by a matriarch. So the titles of Countess and Earl could very well be switched around here. Beyond this though, very little is known of her character or demeanor, as she's absent of a moveset, and actually absent of a character model despite the fact she has intros. Or does she? Because this is where things get really interesting. From the intros we do have here, we do come to learn that many of them would be taken and given to Takeda. So it does raise two questions here of, was Jade simply a placeholder for Takeda, or originally considered for Kombat Pack 1? And honestly, it's really hard to say, but it does make sense in a lot of ways. when you consider the theme of the Kombat Pack 1 MK characters, and how it's the return of legacy individuals like Quan Chi and Ermac. When you think about it, Takeda's kind of the odd one out of the trio, isn't he? Having been a next generation character from MKX. So I do think that quite early on in development, there may have been some intent to actually have Jade be in game as part of the first Kombat Pack. At least only for that idea to then be shelved in favour of Takeda's return. Keep in mind, it's just purely hypothetical in my end. I do think it does make some sense here. And here are where things also get a little bit crazy, because the other two data mined characters in game is Kung Jin and Cassie Cage. Both MKX characters who also, much like Takeda, do have character models in game, as they both appear in the final chapter of the game during the Battle of Armageddon, with Cassie herself having a hybridized look from X and 11, and Kung Jin here looks completely different, rocking a new hairstyle and design. So what do we know of them lore-wise here? How and where exactly do they fit into the mold of this era? Well, first off, let's start with Cassie Cage, as it is the most outlandish choice considering the time period. Now from the dialogue and exposition we do have here, we can very clearly tell that Cassie's still a bit of a wisecracking smartass, taking on the traits of her father, which is notably mentioned by Nitara, which more or less does give away and confirm that yes, this Cassie Cage is indeed the child of Johnny, meaning that she's also the daughter of Sonya. Thus, it's somewhat the Cassie Cage of old. However, the circumstances surrounding her existence in this timeline is questionable to say the least. Because as we know, whilst Johnny Cage and Sonya do exist in the present, the two are yet to at all meet, meaning that the only way for this Cassie Cage to exist in this present would be as a remnant from the Battle of Armageddon, a battle where an evil version of her dies, meaning that this iteration must be her good counterhalf. Unfortunately, as information goes surrounding Cassie Cage, this is all I'm ultimately able to decipher with the tools I have, as there isn't an arcade ladder ending that kind of details what was going on with her here. So I do suspect she must have been cut quite early in development. So this now takes us onto our next combat kid here, Kung Jin. And honestly, out of all of the combat kids here, this is honestly one I'm very surprised that hasn't returned in any playable capacity, considering his absence in MK11 and now 1, despite the new look and attire. Now much like Cassie in that regard, he does have his own model, in fact a complete design rehaul that can be publicly found. So again, in my mind it was just such a surprise that he hasn't at all returned in any limited small capacity, not even as a cameo. So what do we know of him narratively? Well, in terms of intros and exposition, there's really not a lot of substance to go off here. Only that he's still really into his bow. But from what we do know in-game from passing dialogue, is that Kung Jin does look to be infatuated by the Yakuza, meaning that he may bear a keen interest in the criminal ways, or maybe has already started, as again there is no arcade ladder ending that kind of details what's going on with Kung Jin outside of these data mined intros. But things don't quite end there, you see, because with a combat pack does of course mean cameos. And my oh my, did we have some shelved here. 4 to be specific, that's being Kintaro, Liu Kang, Li Mei and Shinnok. Up to what capacity and how they would have played, I really have no idea, as their moves and model simply don't exist here. So they could have in fact been placeholders. But when I do think about it, there is some significant weight behind the inclusion of these characters, especially Shinnok. Because outside of just the MK1 hemisphere, we do know that the team did of course launch Mortal Kombat Onslaught, another mobile game where Shinnok was the main big bad, and did have a completely new and polished model. And as we do know, Mortal Kombat does really love linking your console games with your mobile games. There's a lot of crossover between their games. I'm simply going off the writing on the wall here, but again, in my mind, it makes a lot of sense why Shinnok was actually here. Now this does actually largely summarize my coverage of the lost and forgotten contents of this possible Kombat Pack 3. But from breaking this all down and analyzing the characters, I gotta say that as combat packs go, I think this is pretty okay. It's not bad, but it just doesn't quite have that big returning star power like a noob Cybot. And the combat kids are characters that are kind of to be desired at this point. Whilst I think Jade's a great inclusion, I definitely think her portrayal in 11 has definitely tainted our perception of her. So all in all, I think its base characters are Well, this is all simply going off the minimal bits of information we do have here. Thus, with that said and everything covered here, what are your thoughts on this supposed leftover Kombat Pack 3? Would this have been something you'd like to see? What do you think of the characters? What do you think of the cameos? Do you think it would have been worth your time, or are you glad it's over? Please do comment down below, as I'd love to hear what you have to say. But until the next one, everyone, take care.